WNBA star Brittney Griner has pleaded guilty to drug possession charges in Russia. Griner told a Moscow court she brought marijuana vape cartridges into the country by accident. Caitlin Huey-Burns has more on the case.
Pleading guilty to drug charges in Russian court, Griner said she accidentally packed cannabis oil in her bag.
I would like to plead guilty on the charges. I had no intention on breaking any Russian law.
The WNBA star has been in Russian custody since February, and pressure is now building on the Biden administration to bring her home.
We are not going to ever be quiet until she's home safely.
The president responded to a letter Griner wrote him from prison pleading for action. He called Griner's wife Wednesday, telling her he is working to secure Brittney's release as soon as possible, as well as the release of Paul Whelan and other U.S. nationals who are wrongfully detained. But the Whelan family is still waiting for their call from the president.
You know, the White House says on the one hand, presidential calls, presidential meetings are not dispositive. They're not what's going to result in your family member being released. And then they do that for some people and not for others.
Griner's guilty plea, what kind of impact does this have on the negotiations to try to bring her home?
It will have no impact on any of the negotiations. We're going to do everything that we can to bring home Brittney Griner safely and to also make sure that we bring Paul Whelan back home as well.
Jonathan Franks is a crisis management consultant who worked on the release of Marine veteran Trevor Reed in a prisoner swap earlier this year.
A number of strategic reasons why people would enter a guilty plea, even if they are in fact innocent, and that may be what happened here.
Griner's legal team said they hope her guilty plea will lead to a less severe sentence, and they hope the court considers her contributions to Russian sport, adding that she wanted to take responsibility for her actions. Jamie?
We'll see how that plays out. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you very much. For more on this, I'm joined by Sean Sullivan. He's the deputy politics editor for campaigns at the Washington Post. Sean is also a CBS News political contributor. We appreciate you being here. I have to ask, has Griner's guilty plea set the stage? Everybody's talking about this for a potential prisoner swap with Russia. And when you look at who they want to swap with, there's a big discrepancy in really the charges here.
Yeah, it's a complicated question, and the short answer right now is we don't really know. This could potentially be a step towards some sort of deal. And look, we've seen Russia and the United States as recently as earlier this year, create the conditions such that they could do a prisoner swap. So it's possible. My colleague at the Post has some reporting on this, indicating that the Russian side is saying basically, look, this case has to reach a conclusion before any sort of broader discussions can happen. So if you view it through that context, the fact that we now have this guilty plea, if it does sort of bring us closer to the conclusion of this case, then that could potentially create a process. But as you point out, it's a very, very complicated thing. It's not something that this White House clearly wants to discuss in public. It's not something really either side wants to discuss. Any sort of negotiations would happen in private. They're very, very sensitive. So it's really sort of unclear where this goes from here in terms of the future of Griner and also the future of any potential swap between the Russian side and the United States.
And there's a reason she potentially could have pled guilty anyway. You can sometimes get a lesser sentence. The court takes that into consideration, that you're taking responsibility for what you've done. You know, the person they're thinking about that's an interest in a prisoner swap looks like Victor Bout. He's a convicted arms dealer, currently serving 25-year sentence here in the United States. Little different than bringing marijuana cartridges into the country, unbeknownst, she says, that she forgot about them. This detention and trial comes at such a low point, really, in U.S.-Russia relations now due to the war in Ukraine. You know, this all started transpiring back in February. We've had this very long war raging on now. How is the White House planning to approach these talks? As you said, it's an extremely delicate situation.
Yeah, it's a really, really sensitive situation. Under normal terms, it would be sensitive, but it's not as if these two countries are on good terms right now where they can just talk to each other in a really, really friendly way. I mean, for the past few years, tensions have escalated. And then when Russia decided to invade Ukraine, we saw tensions really, really escalate in a big way. And so there is not a good dynamic right now between the Russian government and the United States government. That much is very, very clear. So it makes a tricky situation even more tricky. What are we hearing from the White House on this? They really haven't said much. They've tried to underscore, look, we think that, this is not a proper detainment. We're going to do everything in our power. This is a top priority for the president. That's what we hear from the White House. They're underscoring the communication efforts that they have tried with Griner and her family. But it's not totally clear where this goes. And when you add that layer, this really, really tense dynamic right now between Russia and the United States for reasons having nothing to do with this case, the result is a pretty complicated situation and one that doesn't look really, really like there's a clear resolution, at least at this point right now.
Before I let you go, I do want to ask you, too, that Kate Bedingfield will be the latest senior advisor to leave the Biden administration later this month. Can you tell us a little bit more about her exit?
Yeah, Kate Bedingfield has been with President Biden before he was President Biden. She was an official on his campaign, so she's been with him for a long time. She's been a top official in the communications operation in the White House. White House says that she's leaving to spend more time with her family. We've reached a point now in this White House, in this administration, where we've seen other top officials also leave. Jen Psaki, who was the first White House press secretary for President Biden, also recently left. When you talk to White House officials or former White House officials, they point out this job can be very, very demanding, especially if you have young kids. It's a lot of hours. But I think there are also questions now about the future of the White House and specifically the communications operation. We've seen at times Democrats scratch their heads and say, look, we wish this White House had more of a message, had more of a coherent theme for us to run on in the midterm elections. And so the question now moving forward is who takes this role? Does the communications approach of this White House change at all? I think that's something we're going to want to watch in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to watch that. Sean Sullivan, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.